Hi everybody, welcome to the Just a Person podcast, a show that explores life's highs, lows, and in-betweens. I'm Madison, and in the words of this week's guest Adam, things are about to get real. This week and next week is a two-part series where we're going to talk about some pretty heavy topics like being in a war, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and PTSD. So if those are things that are going to be upsetting or triggering to you, maybe these ones aren't for you, but I do think they're very important topics to talk about, so we're going to be covering all of that. In this particular episode this week, we are talking about why he joined the Army, the education he received from the Army, and what it was like being deployed. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello.
Hi. How you doing?
Welcome to the podcast, New Adam.
Well, thanks for having me.
I gotta clear up, so New Adam is in reference to my brother Adam, who is old Adam. He's younger, but he was here first, so you get the new Adam, he gets the old Adam.
I did, yeah. He's been around a little bit longer than me, so yeah, I'm the new Adam, which is actually quite funny, so makes me feel a little bit younger, so it's kind of nice.
It's kind of a funny nickname, though.
It is. I like it, though. I've been called a lot of weird nicknames before. New Adam is one of the better ones, so I guess we'll go ahead and keep that one.
I mean, I guess at least it has your name in it, right?
That's true. That is true. Yes.
All right, let's get started. I'm going to ask you the question for this week. So the question is, what is your favorite hobby?
Well, right now, I've had a lot of them throughout the years, but right now, my biggest thing is mountain biking. I like going out on the local trails here and, getting on my mountain bike and riding. I'm not too good at jumping yet, so I try to stay away from that so I don't break anything. But yeah, I like going out mountain biking and meeting other people out there, so I enjoy the heck out of that. It's a lot of fun.
I'm curious, how did you even get into mountain biking?
So, funny story, I used to do at our local church here, they always do this bike trip every year on the roads and stuff. We ride around in northern Michigan and do this long trip. And road biking is fun. And then I thought, man, there was this other guy that mountain biked a lot. And I thought, man, I should try that out. So for Christmas a few years ago, I got a really nice new mountain bike and started hitting the trails. And yeah, I just enjoy it. So I just kind of got into it just through other people.
Okay, fair enough. For me, I would say, as you can probably guess, sitting in my room right now and looking around, my favorite hobby is playing guitar. I've played guitar for like 12 years now, and it's just something that's always kind of stuck for me. So yeah, that's my favorite hobby.
I've got a guitar at home and I've tried here and there and have dabbled with it, but it's really not one of my talents. I don't like how the strings make my fingers hurt. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of stops me after a while, but I guess I'll keep trying. Maybe I'll pick up piano or something. Who knows? Yeah,
I do often tell people the hardest part about playing guitar is building up the calluses on your fingers, because I remember when I first started, my fingers would like blister and bleed, but then after a few weeks they calloused over, and it's the kind of thing you have to keep up with, or the calluses go away, and then you just don't even want to play anymore because it hurts.
Well, too, that I habitually chew my fingernails too, so I always got those little short fingernails, and sometimes you bite them off a little too short, and that hurts too, and then you got to try playing the guitar. So yeah, I don't know, maybe me and guitar playing don't fit together too well.
Okay, so you mentioned you had a lot of other hobbies. What were your hobbies when you were a kid?
Obviously, as any little kid growing up in a rural area like I did, you get from point A to point B with a bicycle. And so when I was a kid, we would set up jumps and ride. We were huge into riding our bikes. And then as a little kid, especially, I did a lot of camping and a lot of hanging out outdoors. Wasn't much of a hunter or fisherman. I just liked going out in the woods. And then when I got older, my stepbrother moved in with my family. He was a little bit older than I was. He had a license, he could drive, but he had muscular dystrophy. So he wasn't able to physically do a whole lot of stuff. And his big thing was radio-controlled race cars. And about 16 years old, I really got into that. There's these little model cars, you've got a radio and you race them around a track. So we did that quite a bit and we had a blast. In fact, I think I mentioned to you, as I get older, it's something I'm like, man, that'd be kind of fun again, So I don't know, maybe that'll be my next hobby. I'm not sure.
So at what age did you decide that you wanted to go into the Army?
So I think I always wanted to. I come from a family where a lot of my uncles had served. I have an uncle that served in Vietnam, a couple others that served. They were all in the Army except for one uncle who was a mechanic in the Air Force. So, my family had a lot of service background as far as the military was concerned. And I think, as a young kid, like I said, growing up in a rural area, I used to like sneaking around the woods. I thought, man, this would be kind of neat to do this. So I seriously started thinking about it when I was 15 to 16 years old. When you're a young kid in high school and trying to think about what your future is going to look like. I really wanted to give it a go, and with me, I didn't want to just jump into it full time. I had other things I wanted to do. I had aspirations to go to college and everything else at the same time. So when I was 16, I really thought about it. At 17, I joined the Army Reserve, which at the time was a weekend a month. 2 weeks during the summer, you got to go to boot camp and do all that other training and stuff. So kind of the best of both worlds as far as I was concerned. So I went ahead and did that at 17 years old. Yeah.
So do you think you got into it because of your family and that was kind of what you knew? I mean, I do think a lot of times people do kind of end up doing just what they know. Was it that for you, or was it just the idea that you wanted to serve as well?
Yeah, I don't know if it was more of that, but I just kind of always felt a calling of, others may disagree and that's fine. But, my way of thinking is I live in the greatest country in the world. And, for me to give back just a little bit isn't that big of a deal. I almost felt like it was, and I still do. I feel like it was my duty to do it. The family reason, that was there. But the biggest thing was just to give back to this place that, I'm blessed to live in and was blessed to grow up in.
That's a pretty deep thought for a 17-year-old to have.
It was a little strange. I actually remember, I can't remember what school it was at, but anyway, they had these boards where you would go in front of a bunch of people that outranked you. It was a very nerve-wracking experience. And I won the award of Soldier of the Month because that was my response to why did you join the Army? And I just said, I feel it's my duty as an American to do it. And boom, stamped my paperwork, handed me a certificate, you win. But no, that's truly how I felt as a kid. So, I looking back on it, it's kind of a big thing to think that way. But for me, it was just a normal way of thinking.
So we've talked about this before, but you had a bit of a windy career experience.
Yeah, I guess I'm one of those very unconventional people. I mentioned that I wanted to go to college and everything, and I did that. I went to, one of the local community colleges here while being a reservist in the Army. They sent me off to school to learn how to be a medic. They gave me a scholarship to go to paramedic school, and I did that for a while, and I don't know if it was trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, but I just didn't fit. Me with just your conventional education, apparently I'm not very good at it. So I did. All of my education's been through the Army, and I've been very lucky to get where I'm at because of them guys. I went off to medic school. Then I became a surgical technologist. I did that through the Army. I went to combat medic school, like a more advanced field medicine school, and I did that, became an EMT, and then because I did well in that, I was able to actually go to nursing school all through the Army. So it's been a good experience.
So going into the Army, did you think you wanted to make a career out of it, or you were just kind of doing, what you thought was your duty, and then you were going to get out and do something else?
At the time, as a young kid, I just wanted to do my 4 years, 6 years, whatever, and just get out. So I joined in 92. I didn't graduate from high school until 94. So in 93, I went to basic training, came home and finished high school, and then went back in to do some other schooling before I came back home to go to college. For me, it was just, hey, I'm going to do my time. And I did get out officially in 2000, but in 1998, so 4 years after I graduated high school, I quit doing the whole Army thing. Got married, had 2 kids. Number 3 was coming along. And I think we've talked about this too, is, I would stand there on Sundays and I would watch the TV. This was in 2006, 2007. I'd sit there and watch these casualty lists every Sunday morning. They would have them on the morning shows. And I would see these guys that, served and didn't make it home. And the thought, I was almost convicted to go back in. And at that point, it was to really serve and, whatever they need from me, I'm going to go ahead and do it. So I guess, initially when I first went in, I was just doing my time. After that 7-year break, it was definitely, let's go in and do some good.
I do want to throw in that you were a firefighter as well.
Yeah, so I did that for a while. I did that for 6 or 7 years. Really enjoyed it. It's the local fire department here, and it was just kind of like a paid on-call deal. But yep, I went to firefighter school through the fire department. Really enjoyed it. Had a good time with it, and I did that for a while. Had some good scary situations and some big fires that were quite interesting. But yeah, I did that for a while. Now I don't have the, I think we'll get into that later. I just don't have the, I guess mentally I couldn't handle it anymore because it does get quite difficult. Yeah.
Maybe it didn't, but did that in any way prepare you for anything you were going to be doing in the Army?
It did. So when I deployed to Iraq with a trauma surgery team, it was beneficial because, I had been in certain situations where somebody needs my help right away or they're going to die. That sense of urgency to do something right now to help somebody stay alive. I learned that through the fire department. So it did benefit me later on down the road when I really needed it.
So you're seeing all these names on the casualty list, and that makes you want to re-enlist?
I guess my big thing is, and like I told my wife at the time, who was like 6 months pregnant with baby number 3, I told her, I said, I can't just sit here and do nothing. It's time that I do this. And, God bless her, she's been pretty understanding. But, her whole thing was, well, what if you go to war and what if you don't make it? And I kept telling her, I said, well, if I don't go, somebody else's dad's going to have to go. And so that was kind of my outlook on it. And it was so funny. I'd been in before, but I had to go back to the recruiting office to get back in. And again, I did the reserve side because I had a pretty decent career here at a local company. I was doing quite well, making a good living and enjoying my job. So I'm like, I'm just going to do the reserves and see what's going on. I think a thing to add on here is when I was in initially as a kid, in the 90s, the Army used their reserve force just for break glass in case they're needed. You really weren't preparing to go anywhere. When I came back in, what was a big difference that I didn't realize was that they were starting to use the Army Reserves and National Guard as they were putting them in the rotation for deployments. And I didn't realize that, especially in the medical community. In the reserve side, a lot of us work civilian side with medicine. So we do have more experience a lot of times in a lot of those full-time units. So yeah, we were, being put into these rotations again and, to go to war. And like I said, I didn't realize that at the time. So yeah, it was very interesting, but it was funny. I had that 7-year break. We go back into the recruiting office and I remember my wife is out to hear, the baby, and she demanded to go with me. And we sit down with the recruiter and he says, if you're coming back in, you got to go away for a couple months to go to this other school. And she says, yeah, we're not doing that. She said, he's staying home. And the guy looked at her and smiled and said, okay, typed in a few things on his computer. And he says, okay, you're all set. Here's your orders. Here's the unit you're going to. And you're in. So I often credit my wife with getting me out of having to go to at least one additional school. So that was kind of nice.
So then you did end up getting to leave after your child was born. What was kind of the timeline on that?
I know, you said that I've had kind of this winding path and it just keeps winding. So yeah, I got in, we had the baby, little boy. He was a few months old and I had to go to Texas for 6 months to learn how to be a surgical tech. The Army told me I had to go do that. So here I am. I've got a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 6-month-old. And I leave my wife for 6 months and I go off to Texas. That was kind of difficult, but on the other end of that, knowing that, okay, after 6 months, I get to come home and I can just go back to my job and do the reserve stuff and everything will be fine. But I think that was really when my wife and I both woke up to the fact of, hey, you know what? I'm in the military during wartime and this is probably going to be our lives for a little while.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember because we did know you at this time. I don't really exactly remember how we all met. I was a bit younger at the time, but I was still older than your kids, so I do remember a lot of these things, and I just really remember you just being gone all the time.
Yes, I remember, we would go to functions and stuff, with your family and everybody else. And it was so funny because when I was there, everybody's like, oh my goodness, you're home. When you leaving again? And that was our life for a good 10, 12 years, So we got used to it, but it's just still not easy.
And how long were you in the reserves before you were deployed?
So I went back in September of '07, and then in August of 2015 I left, but I knew about 8 months before then I would be going.
What were you doing then, kind of in all that in-between time?
So like I said, I worked for a local company here as like an account manager. It was like marketing materials and advertising and things like that. I was an account manager. I did enjoy that. It was a good time. But after I think 2011 or 12, I did that stint with nursing school, and I came home as an LPN. I worked at a nursing home for a few years, and then worked at another hospital. In a respiratory unit. Basically, I gave medications to patients. So I kind of did skip around a little bit in my professional side, but I did. So I went from that, I transitioned from business and advertising and things like that over to the medical side, which, like I said, the Army schools were very beneficial. You know, if you're trained through the military and medicine, a lot of times you can skip all the ancillary stuff. I've never had to take a statistics class, for instance. Thank goodness. I haven't had to take advanced math classes. Thank goodness. They just teach you what it is you need to know. And a lot of companies are like, oh, okay, well, you did that. So the licensing is a little bit relaxed for people that have been through the military. So it was a good transition. You know, the money wasn't as good, but I was definitely enjoying what I was doing a lot more.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how through such a roundabout way you found what you wanted to do, because people don't typically go into the Army and think, oh, I'm going to become a surgical tech.
Yeah, I had no clue. Was I lost? Absolutely not. But I kept thinking, oh man, if I'd go to these schools and be like, oh, this would be kind of cool to do, and this would be kind of cool to do. And so, yeah, it was like I said, or you said, it was kind of a winding road to get where I am right now.
I feel like a lot of people do that in their career. They just kind of start somewhere random and then end up where they're supposed to be somehow. You
know, and that's what I tell everybody. In fact, I've got a son right now that's in college, and it's like, okay, I'm, in my 40s. I'm in my late 40s now. And it's like, you can change what you do for a living anytime you want. The only thing stopping you is you. If there's something you're passionate about, then go after it. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what education level you have. There's everything's out there you need. You just have to have the desire to go out and do it.
I mean, I completely agree with that. I'm 24 and I've had many jobs, so I'm with you on that. But I know you do learn ahead of time when you're going to be deployed. So what was it like for you and your family? How did you prepare when you found that out?
It was scary. I wasn't told I had to go. I actually volunteered. I got a phone call from, in the reserve side when I go to my weekends, my drills, I was a teacher. So I would teach a lot of, like field medicine, if your buddy gets shot, what are you going to do and how are you going to do that? So I did a lot of teaching. And one of the people that was one of my students, she was a sergeant in charge of this surgical unit. And she gave me a call one day and she said, hey, I need a guy at your rank that knows how to be a surgical tech. And she says, we have to deploy. Would you be willing to go? So at the time I was drilling in Wisconsin, and so I called my wife and I'm like, hey, I've got this opportunity to go and I think I'm going to take it. And she's like, oh, okay. So, we had a few months where, it was just kind of hanging over us like, oh my goodness, I'm going to go. And, it was after the whole Iraq war thing was over, just a little background on it. We left Iraq and everything was okay. And then these guys, ISIS rolls in, they take over a huge portion of the country. So President Obama at times like, hey, you know what? Let's help the Iraqis take their territory back, get rid of these ISIS guys. We're not going to send our ground troops in to do the fighting, but we're going to send in support. So they'd send in medical, air support, logistics, all that other stuff. So I was part of that mission, which was the medical part for me.
Okay, so when you're in the medical unit, where are you actually at? Do you have a base or?
It all depends on where they stick you. So we, getting back to the, real quick before I left, we did have those months where I had to train up. So I was working at a hospital at the time and I kept having to take off. I would be gone for a couple weeks to a school or a class, and then I would come home for a couple weeks. Then I'd go away for another couple weeks, and then I'd come home for a couple weeks. So that was very difficult. And, my kids at the time were a little bit older, but they were still young. And, you do have that worry of, hey, I'm being deployed to a combat zone. Am I going to make it home? So, you have to have some real conversations. Obviously with the kids, we didn't talk about that, but the kids knew that I was going off to someplace that really wasn't that safe. And my wife and I had to prepare for what do we do if I don't come home? And the Army definitely helped with that. You know, we would have to go off to these things and get our physicals done, write our wills and all this other stuff. But yeah, it's kind of a heavy thing to be sitting over you for months on end. And in fact, when it comes time to go, you're just ready to get it going because it's been hanging over you for so long. And then, so as far as when we got there, it was funny. We roll in at night. You always fly in at night, obviously, so they can't shoot at planes if they can't see them that well. And we got there at night, and we ended up, we had a tent to sleep in. It was a tent. At least it had a wood floor and some cots in it, which was good. And then right next to that, we had our place where we would work, which was yet another tent. And it was just a small team of us. And we had some surgeons, some nurses, some medics, and surgical techs. And yeah, we just took wounded guys in and did our best to fix them.
You said you're going to help the Iraqi soldiers. So is that mostly what you're taking in then?
Yeah, so mostly Iraqi soldiers. You know, we'd take in. We were right by where the fighting was at, not too close. You know, I mean, we would every once in a while we'd get some rockets or mortars getting launched at us, but we weren't actively getting shot at while we were taking care of people. But we were close enough to where if they got hurt, we could get them in there and take care of them, and you know, we just stabilize them so they could get off to their hospital. So we would just our mission was just to save life, limb, or eyesight, and that's really all we did. You know, if they had a small cut or whatever, we didn't even worry about it because we didn't have the supplies, the time, or the manpower to take care of them. So we just took care of the big stuff. Yeah, but it was just a little tent, little porta-johns, very limited showers, laundry. It was pretty primitive when we got there, for sure.
And who's actually bringing these people in? Or is it people from your unit or like their own soldiers?
The Marines ran our whole thing. So in the Marine Corps, their medical people are from the Navy. Actually, they're called corpsmen. And there were some Navy corpsmen there, and they would go out to the entrance to our little base, which was very small. They would go out there and they would look at the guys that were hurt, and they would actually load them on the back of a pickup truck and bring them over to our tent if they needed our help, which was quite often. But what would happen, the biggest thing is, so if they're out on the battlefield and they get hurt, actually the Iraqi medical people, which I use that term pretty loosely because they really didn't know what to do. They would just load people on trucks, bring them to our base, and then the Navy guys would sort them out and bring them to us. We weren't allowed to go out there because, you know, you did have guys out there with guns and, you know, that wanted to shoot Americans. So they kept the surgical people away from there. But yeah, that's how we ended up getting our guys.
So you have, you know, talked about before that some of the people coming in aren't just soldiers. There are actually just regular civilian people.
Yeah. So, you know, they're fighting in these cities. They were fighting in the cities of, when we got there, they were fighting in the city of Ramadi, which is a pretty big town right there in Iraq. They were fighting there. And of course, you've got civilians living there. So from time to time, we'd get women and children. And then after that, they went into the city of Fallujah. So these guys are fighting in the cities. So, you know, there are people living there. You know, we had a few kids come through that were hurt real bad, which really sticks with you. It's not fun. You know, and a few females would come through, which kind of poses a different issue as far as cultures go. You know, in the Muslim culture, it's usually frowned upon for a man to take care of a woman and lay hands on her, even to help her. So, you know, I think the Iraqis, they definitely understood that, you know, sometimes you got to relax some of those cultural standards to take care of people. And we did our best to accommodate them, but sometimes we just couldn't. But yeah, we did see civilians. Luckily, you know, I've got a huge soft spot for dogs. And we were, if a military working dog got hurt, we were supposed to take care of that. Luckily, I never saw a dog, which would have broke my heart to have to work on a dog, which is strange. You know, you're working on people and it's like, yeah, that's okay. But I think it's because that's what I was trained to do. You know, a dog, it's like, eh. But yeah, kids were the toughest. Kids aren't easy. I think we talked about that too, where, you know, a soldier, I don't care where they're from, a soldier is out there fighting and they know what could happen to them, you know. So if they get tore up and you're helping them, I don't think the psychological impact is as big because they are a soldier and things happen to soldiers. Does it make it easier? Sometimes it does, but a little kid, you know, they're not doing anything wrong and they're just caught in the middle of it. Same with a lady who's just trying to do her laundry, take care of her family, you know, and then she gets hurt. It's tough. Those are the tough ones that you have to deal with.
All right, so this is going to be kind of like a silly one, but I'm going to say it anyway just because I'm curious. So a lot of people kind of get their information from things they don't know about from like TV, movies, you know, things you see like that. And the only thing I can think of someone I've seen in a medical unit in the Army, not like a soldier on the front lines, is in Grey's Anatomy, their trauma surgeon, he's supposed to be like ex-military trauma surgeon in the field, like stationed overseas. And his whole thing is that he can fix anything with anything. He's like a very resourceful guy. Is that kind of how it was for you guys?
Yeah, it is. You just kind of learn to make do. If you're in a place where, you can't get supplies very quickly and you've got a heavy load of patients coming in constantly, you do run out of stuff. And you can't tell somebody who's hurt that you can't fix them because you don't have the right tool. You make do. So that is accurate. I mean, there were times where a surgeon would say to me, so as a surgical tech, in case nobody knows, is my job was to set up the operating room and keep everything as sterile as possible. And during the surgery, I would, hand the surgeon the tools he needs. If he needed me to cut something, I would cut it. I'd do a little bit of sewing, doing stitches and things like that. And so my job was to make sure that they had everything they needed. And sometimes they'd ask me for something. I'd be like, hey, man, I don't have it. And they would say, well, we'll go get it. Well, it's not here. If you want to walk all the way to Kuwait, go ahead. But, this is what we have to do. So even me, not even being a surgeon, I had to tell the surgeons, hey, let's try this instead, or let's try that instead. For the most part, it worked out. Yeah. Sometimes it didn't. But yeah, you definitely have to learn to make do. So that is very accurate. Yeah.
So what were you doing in your free time when no one was there?
For me, it was a couple things. Lots of naps. I just love taking naps, and being in a combat zone did not change that one bit. Still loved my naps. And I played, it was funny, one of the guys had an Xbox shipped to us, and it was the old Xbox because we didn't have any internet. So we got an Xbox and a projector, and we hung a sheet up on a wall, and we would play Xbox, Call of Duty Zombies. Constantly, all the time. That was our big thing.
That's funny that you're in a war and your game of choice is Call of Duty.
Oh, there was a couple times, like after we were there for a while. So if you're getting attacked by rockets or mortars, like radar picks it up, right? And this huge alarm goes off and lets you know that you need to get to a bunker, so a bunker is just like a big cement. It's almost like a cement box, right? And you're supposed to get into that and put on all your, your bulletproof stuff and your helmet. And you're supposed to get in there and wait until they tell you it's all clear. Well, there was a couple times after we'd been there for a while, we found out that the Iraqis, their rockets and mortars weren't very accurate. So this is horrible, but we knew our chances of getting nailed through our tent with a rocket or mortar were pretty low. So after a while, we would just sit there and be like, "Oh man, there goes the alarm again. Okay, hurry! Let me finish shooting this guy, and then we'll go ahead and pause it, and we'll run into the bunker." So yeah, it was interesting the things we did in a combat zone.
So you were a bit higher ranking when you got over there. What was that like?
Yeah, so I was a staff sergeant, which is, in the military, you've got, a couple of different avenues you can go. You can be a commissioned officer, which is like somebody with a bachelor's or master's degree, which I obviously didn't and still don't have. Or you can work your way up through the enlisted ranks. So being a sergeant, my job was to basically, the officers, the boss, she would come up with, hey, we need to do this. My job would be to get it done. So it's almost like a manager of people. I would almost be like managing people. So yeah, I was a staff sergeant at the time, and it was a pretty good gig. Very stressful though, because I had a lot of work to do. I had to make sure that we were getting supplies, and another big thing was we did a lot of blood transfusions. Well, blood you can't just ship it in a UPS box. It has to be, parts of it has to be frozen and flown in. So you have to prearrange all that stuff. So I had a guy that I passed that off on to, which was just phenomenal. He was great at it. Yeah, so there's all these logistics, and then your people, you have to make sure that they're doing okay and sleeping and eating and all that stuff. So stressful job, but it was good.
At the time when you were doing it, was it weighing on you, or did it just feel like, oh, this is my job?
It felt like I had a 6-ton weight on my back. I remember at times when we were really busy. I remember one case in particular where we're sitting there doing surgery, and we've got 2 patients in there, and there's a bunch of us in there. We're working on these guys, and we're, doing what we need to do to keep them alive. And I remember looking at one of the guys and saying, man, I don't think I've eaten in like 2 days. You're so busy, you forget to eat. You literally forget to eat. And so then, all of a sudden, I'm not worried about me. It's like, well, if I haven't eaten in 2 days, when's the last time my people ate? Because I did have guys and gals there. And So then I'd be like, okay, did everybody get something to eat? Or, so I had to worry about that, and of course, as we're there, life goes on for our families. So, sometimes people get phone calls where things aren't going good at home. So you're constantly asking them, hey, how's everything at home? Is everything okay? So at one moment, you got to be kind of the hard charging, do this, do that kind of guy. And then 10 minutes later, you could be putting your hand on someone on your buddy's shoulders and say, hey man, how's everything going at home? Or when did you eat last? Or are you getting any sleep? So yeah, it's a lot of work, and it does weigh on you a lot.
So is it then harder for you to remember to take care of yourself and check up on your family just because you're so worried about all these other people as well besides yourself?
I did have the privilege of having a phone around, so I was able to call home quite a bit. And my wife, God bless her, would try to keep I wouldn't say the small problems to herself, because I think when a spouse is gone overseas and you don't know if they're even going to come home, if any problem is small. But yeah, she did that. She tried to keep those small problems away from me. So yeah, I did talk to home, which was kind of difficult to do. You would think, okay, hey, I get to call home every day if I want to. Well, you do miss home. And, if there is something going on at home, you're thinking about that versus making sure your people are okay. So you're kind of conflicted the whole time, because it's almost like you have two separate families and you have to take care of them both. So yeah, I really, taking care of myself was difficult. Like I said, I like taking naps. That was my thing. And at times I would just have to walk away and just sit there by myself and relax. We had a chaplain there that was really good. The difference between a military chaplain and a civilian priest or pastor is that a military chaplain also works pretty good as a counselor. So I was able to talk to him a lot and kind of unload all of my baggage on him, and that was a big help.
How long were you there for?
So I was there for 9 months total. Our first 7 months was just go. It was just nonstop. I think the longest we constantly had people coming in to get surgery and to get help was 72 hours straight. It was nothing to do a 15, 20 hour day, but then the next day you might only have 3 or 4 hours worth of work. So, and then after about 7 months, then it started tapering off. The Iraqis, they took their objectives they needed to take, and then they started moving up north to a place called Mosul, which was like the last stronghold for the ISIS guys, and that was out of our territory. They had other surgical teams up there, so they kind of took the load for us, and things started settling down there after about month 7.
When you go, do you actually know how long you're going to be gone, or do they just give you a general time frame?
They kind of give you a general date, because they can say, well, okay, we know you've been here for 9 months, but, we can't get anybody else here, or something, something could happen where they have to extend you out. So approximately how long you're going to be there, but not a definite date for sure.
So then when you found out you were going to come home, how long was it between then and when you actually did come home?
It was probably 3 or 4 weeks. We got a date of, okay, hey, on this day, you guys are heading out. And in fact, we got delayed twice because we had to fly from Iraq into Kuwait. And, you got issues with flights coming in and out because it's all military aircraft. And, they might be busy somewhere else and can't come pick you up, or there's weather issues. But yeah, so we actually got delayed a couple times. But yeah, we ended up getting to Kuwait. And funny story about that, we're flying from, central Iraq where we were at. We're going to have to fly up to northern Iraq and pick some people up and then go to Kuwait, where we ended up having to get off and get ready to go home. And we were on our flight and we lost an engine on the airplane. It was a C-130. So it was a 4-engine cargo plane. It's the middle of the night, of course, and we're over the middle of the desert and we lost an engine. They're like, well, we're not going to northern Iraq. We're just going to go to Kuwait. But don't worry, because we can run just fine on 3 engines. I'm like, okay. So, all right, so we'll make it. Well, a few minutes later, I see a bunch of people scrambling, the air crew's scrambling around. We lost another engine. So we're flying this airplane back to, we're done. We made it, and I'm like, man, we are going to crash in the middle of the desert on our way home. This is horrible. But anyway, we did end up making it just fine. But that's just a funny story I talk about to this day, because one of my buddies, I remember as we took off, I hit him on the leg. I'm like, war's over, man. We're going home. And then we started losing engines, and he just looked at me and just shook his head, and he had this look on his face like, dude, we are gonna die, and you jinxed us. So
yeah, you survive a literal war zone for 9 months just to die in a plane crash on the way home.
Would have been a good story, but yeah, I would not have liked that a whole lot.
Oh man, that would stress me out so much.
I was very stressed, but we made it.
So then after you did all that, you went to Texas?
Yeah, so then we went to Kuwait for a little bit, turned in, the stuff that you can't bring home, your weapons and all that stuff. We had to turn all those in, and we had to go through customs in Kuwait before we came back to the States to make sure we weren't bringing anything over that we shouldn't. So we had a few days in Kuwait. We flew to Texas, to Fort Hood, and then we had to go through all our physical stuff. Their big thing is you do a physical before and after you go, just make sure you're okay before you go. And then when you get home, they check you for any injuries and stuff like that. And then again, mental health is a big part of that. You do see, mental health professional and just kind of tell them what's going on with you. And then after they clear you, they give you your final pay and you head on home.
So I was actually there at the airport when you came home.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're at the airport.
And it's like a big to-do, right? Everyone's very happy. It's like, woohoo, yay. And then, I'm sure that's very exciting for you. You haven't seen all these people in so long. But then you go home and it's finally just, you go to your house and it's just quiet.
Yeah, it's it's like you're walking into a different world. And like I said, I think it's different, and I don't know if it is or not. The guys that are full-time military, and you're going from overseas back to a military base, and there's all these military people around you. You come home as a reservist, you're back in the civilian world, just like that. And so you walk into the house, it's like, oh my gosh, I haven't been here in almost a year, and things are different. And I think that the big issue I had was I expected everything to stay the same. Like when I came home after all that time, nothing was going to change at home. Well, you realize, and it's easy to say life goes on for everybody else, but until you actually go through it and witness that, it doesn't seem real, You don't feel like it's your home.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you just spent like all this time with so many other people, and now you're somewhere else. None of them are around.
Yeah, having to wear your body armor to go to the bathroom, you don't have to do that anymore. And it's like, oh my gosh, I can walk outside without having to sling my weapon over my shoulder or put on my helmet. Or another thing is, hey, it's not 120 degrees out here at home. So it's like walking into a different world. It's very strange.
And now you're worried about completely different things, like, oh, I need to go pick up a birthday card for our party on Saturday, or I need to go get milk from the grocery store.
I describe it as, when you come home, when you're over there, you've got just a few jobs. Yes, they're big jobs, but, your job is to make sure your people are okay, make sure you're okay, to make sure whatever mission you have gets carried out. You get home and it's like, okay, what's the cell phone bill going to be this week or this month, or got this going on with the car and that, and, it's just something that you're not used to having to deal with. And that's a very difficult transition. I mean, simple things too, very simple things like, before I left, I'd been married for years, and sleeping in the same bed as somebody else, as my wife, was really weird at first, and for her too. She's used to, she's used to not having me there or having one of the kids in there with her. And all of a sudden here I am. So very strange.
Well, I'm like thinking now, there has to be so many hard things. Number one, you're not around these people that you're like willing to sacrifice your life for, that you were with for so long. You don't see them anymore. Yeah. You're with people, like, you've been through this experience, and it's such a different, like, we here are worrying about cell phone bills, and those are things that you have to do, but it just doesn't, I'm sure, seem like it matters at all. Yeah,
and that's the hard part. And, especially as being a reservist, when you're a full-time soldier, when that's what you do, you get done with deployment, you go back to your duty station. Well, you're around all kinds of people that have been through what you've been through. In my case, you get home and you're dumped off to a bunch of people that have no idea what you did, that can't understand it, and it's no fault of their own. I'm glad that you haven't had to go through it, or my family hasn't had to go through it, or people we know haven't had to go through. I'm glad of that. But that community is just, it's gone. So you're kind of on your own. You almost do feel lost, and it is hard. Yeah, it's not easy.
That's it for part 1 of Adam's story. If you have a story you want to personally share on the show, want to be read on air, or a topic you'd like to see discussed, find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at JustAPersonPod, or send us an email at justapersonpod@gmail.com, and we'll see you next Monday with part 2 of Adam's story.